So one question I have, and I think other people have, as we get further and further into True Detective Night Country, is how is this show doing so well with critics when audiences are clearly divided? Obviously, there's a lot of people defending the show. I am constantly told that I'm a bad person and I must be an incel or a misogynist or a racist to not like this show because people can't actually just deal with the show on its own merits and its own terms, and I don't think it's good enough for people to defend it without, personally attacking critics or other viewers who don't like it, or telling you that, why do you watch it if you don't like it? Well, I don't know. I'm a fucking critic, and maybe people just want to know what happens. Even if they don't like it, they still want to see it through. But why is the critic score like 92% on Rotten Tomatoes, whereas the audience score has fallen to like 66%, and that's with Issa Lopez, the showrunner, actively asking fans to boost its rating. It keeps falling because the episodes keep getting worse. So, I think there are three reasons. First of all, Rotten Tomatoes itself is a terrible barometer of what critics actually believe. There's a few reasons for this. First of all, critics can, but often don't, choose whether their review is considered rotten or fresh. That's automated. If you're in the system, your review just gets uploaded, and they decide if it's rotten or fresh. You can go in there and change it, or if you upload your own review, you can choose. But a lot of times I'll go and I'll see one of my reviews and it's just already been decided whether it's rotten or fresh. I don't have any say in it unless I actively go find that. Most critics, I don't think, go spend a lot of time on their Rotten Tomatoes account changing things up. They just let the system handle it. And so even if you read a review, sometimes you'll read reviews for Night Country, for instance, and it'll be pretty critical, but it'll show a fresh. And that might sometimes be based on if they give it a star or like 8 out of 10 or something. But a lot of times there's not a score associated with a review, and so it's just guesswork. And even scores, what does that mean? Like, you could give, every single critic could give a 7 out of 10, which you'd think, okay, that's like a 70%, right? But on Rotten Tomatoes, if every critic gives a 7 out of 10, that's 100%, because it's just based on how many positive reviews there are, not how positive they were. So 100 critics all give a show 7 out of 10, that's 100% Rotten Tomatoes score. If all critics gave a 6 out of 10, which is 6 is lower than fresh, that would be 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's fundamentally broken right there. So that's part of it. Another thing is on Rotten Tomatoes, critics, we don't know how many episodes they've seen, so maybe they only got 2 screeners, and they're basing their season review, or what they write as a review, that lands on the season review page, that will show whatever they thought of those first 2 episodes. And maybe they were great, and so it's got a great review. Rings of Power, everyone got 2 episodes. A lot of positive reviews from those 2, but the season went downhill significantly from there, and that score is not reflected. It doesn't change, because people usually don't write another review, or they're writing episodic reviews that don't affect the total score, only the episodic scores. So that's another problem. Second problem, I think that a lot of reviewers, with this show in particular, are afraid to criticize because of the diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff, and because it's a show that's like, it's a female version of True Detective, criticizing, and that's in a way a critique of how very male it's been up until this point. And so people are afraid, if I critique this, I'm going to be called racist or sexist. Because it's about Native Americans, it's about women, it's about minorities, right? Indigenous people. And so they're afraid that if they criticize this, they're going to be labeled on social media and elsewhere as racist or sexist. I can attest to this. This happens to me all the time. This happened to me with this show a lot. And finally, I think critics are afraid of being punished and losing access, right? This is something that critics are always afraid of with video games, with movies, with TV shows. If you're too harsh, if you're too critical, you will no longer get review copies. You will no longer get screeners. I've had screeners taken away from me with Fear the Walking Dead, for instance. One of the only times in TV that I've had screeners taken away. But also, maybe you don't get them taken away for this show, but then they say, no, we're not giving you any more screeners because you were too mean. So people are afraid of that. People are afraid of being blacklisted. People are afraid of, critics are afraid of not being invited to the movie screenings or whatever else. And And so you combine these factors, and this is why you get a very blurry picture of what actual critic consensus is for something like True Detective Night Country. And it can go both ways, you know. Something can look worse because it's gotten, you know, a few bad reviews, but most people like it. And so that's the problem also with aggregations, is that it's not a complete picture. Even though it's aggregating a lot of reviews that gives you one idea of it, it's not giving you a very complete picture of what people actually feel. That's why you got to read some of these, right? Not just go by scores. Yeah. So that's it. That's why. I've answered the question. I also think that this creates a situation where people mistrust critics. They look at the score and they're like, oh, these critics are full of crap. These critics really like this thing that's not good, or they really didn't like this thing that I really like. And obviously some of that just boils down to taste. You know, the people watching the show are going to be fans, so they might review it higher than critics who may not be fans and are just actually more objective. You know, and people accuse critics all the time of bias or not being objective, but typically it's the fans who really like the thing who are less objective than the critics. Critics may be ignorant, and that's a problem. You know, I've seen shows like Game of Thrones or The Witcher's first season, you know, criticized by people who don't really like fantasy. And you know, it's useful to read a critic who doesn't like fantasy if you don't like fantasy, but for people who are into that kind of thing, reading that review can just come off as really snobby and kind of out of touch. So it's complicated. What can I say? It's complicated. Anyways, I'm just going to make this was a short video. Obviously, I've been talking about Night Country a lot, and you know how I feel about it. And I think that if you actually dig into some of those reviews that are shown as positive, you'll see that a lot of critics are actually much more critical of this show than its Rotten Tomatoes score suggests. And yeah, there's very, very few actually negative reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, but a lot of the positive ones are not super positive. And then there are a few that are like overboard, like, wow, this is the best thing since season 1, or like better than season 1. And those people are just bad critics. Anyways, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Peace.